Hi, I'm Steve Barnes from Barnes Creative Studios. We specialize in ADA compliance for virtual tours with our patent-pending 360 AG, which will add ADA compliance or accessibility at the WCAG 2.1 AA level for most brands of virtual tours. The big question that we always get is, what is the process of becoming accessible? And that can mean a whole lot. So I wanted to bring in an expert from Allyant, Ryan Wieland, who is the VP of Digital Accessibility Sales. Hey, Ryan.
Hi, Steve. How you doing today?
Doing good. We've worked together for a few years on a couple of projects, and I believe that you guys are one of the best out there at what you do. So I wanted to just kind of take people through the process. I think it's a whole lot more than people think it is. And it starts with either A, somebody on your team deciding that you would like to be accessible, which means under and up to a certain level to protect yourself legally, but also to open up your content. Or B, you got a demand letter, which we hope is not the case, but more and more brands every month are getting these. So I usually get a panicked call for the ones who got the demand letter and say, what do I do? And what they expect is it's just a flip of a switch. Oh, just make me compliant. Not quite that, is it, Ryan?
No, you're exactly right. And I think you explained it perfectly. So we've, especially in the last few years, I think there's been a big trend for what we call proactive accessibility. So there is just more awareness on this is a thing. There is a level of risk if we don't do anything. So at least we should be thinking about this. Like let's start the path of what is it? Who should we be working with? At least start those conversations. On the flip side, the more common process, unfortunately, is that demand letter, that lawsuit from a plaintiff firm or one of their plaintiffs claiming non-access to a website, a digital property, etc. The biggest thing that we honestly, and I know this sounds simple, right? Like we're an accessibility vendor, but I think that the biggest thing that we say when you get that panicked call or when you are that client with that panic, sort of thought is take a deep breath. Like to your point, you're not going to, nor can you solve this overnight. So like, let's take a deep breath,
No.
Let's step back. Let's see what the claims actually were. I think sometimes a lot of the claims are pretty baseline. They're pretty, high level. They're kind of overarching. What I like to say is you didn't build your site in 24 hours. You didn't build your site in 48 hours. How
Right.
long did that take? How much content have you built in over the last 2, 3, 5 years? And so there is a lot out there. You have a lot of code. You have a lot of key templates, functionalities, user flows that people with disabilities need to access and leverage to engage with your brand every single day. So let's think about how we can actually streamline that and make it compliant. It's not a 2-year process, but it's not a 2-day process either.
No, it's not. And, usually the first thing and the first reaction is denial. And that is with a lot who have come in, through the emails or through phone lines, denial, and then they go into a bit of a depression because it's overwhelming and they're getting fire hosed with information. And I've been there. So many years ago, when we first met, I was in a situation where I just didn't comprehend how deep this was. And I thought, oh, well, just fix it. And tomorrow, let me know and send me the bill. It's not that. So I want to break down. First of all, we've got a website, your website that we're talking about. And then we're talking about third-party media. Could be YouTube, could be a virtual tour, which is what we deal with. And what we have found with clients is sometimes you get that general inquiry like you were talking about, where someone comes in and they want to put a demand letter on your website. Well, they're casting a really big net. And what happens is if you try to cut corners and just fix a little bit of stuff, then they come back and they go at your virtual tours. And then they come back and they go at your media. And some of these instances, and some websites could have hundreds of instances, could be like $4,000 an instance, which I've seen in some settlements. And that's not even taking into consideration fixing your entire site, paying the other side's legal fees.
Yep.
It's pretty hairy. So go back to the first step. You go to a website when I call you and say, hey, I want to send you these guys, because we don't do that. We don't do what you do. We complement what you do by fixing virtual tours or adding accessibility. So when you take a look at a site, what happens what does that mean? Do you have someone actually with a disability reviewing the site?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, Steve. And I think I'll take a quick step back to your thought on denial. And I think that that is a common state that people go into, and it's a denial of not knowing what in the world is this. We've never thought about it, almost feeling bad that they hadn't thought about it. But the reality is digital accessibility and compliance and WCAG is still pretty new. I mean, yeah, it's been around now
Very.
for a while, but we're still on the leading edge of this, and we're still on the leading edge of all of these cases. And what we like to tell clients that we talk to or prospects that reach out in that panic, in that denial, is you're not alone. Like, it wasn't, you didn't get singled out. Someone didn't just say, like, you're the only non-compliant site on the internet. I mean, most sites on the internet as we stand today are not compliant. And honestly, there was probably a lot of similar organizations that received the exact same letter, the same sort of reach out from that plaintiff firm, etc. So that's one thing that I would say is, like, you're not alone. Like, and that's where the deep breath comes from. Like, let's take a step back and assess exactly what needs to be done. Then to your more pointed question of what is the process, from there, we like to have a conversation with the client every single time to really assess that. Like what can you do? What do you control, to your exact point? Like, what third parties are you using? Especially, depending on the space, like hospitality, where I know you guys do a lot of work. It can be things
Mhm.
from not just maybe using WordPress for your core backend or your CMS platform, but you use a plugin for bookings. And who is that plugin? And are they accessible? How does someone come to your site, find the room they want to book, but then go down that booking process? Do you use something for contact forms? Do you have a cookie banner that's a
So
third
even
party?
right now, what you're saying, people are glazing over. I can see it through the internet. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And this is the big disconnect. How is this all simplified?
Yeah, and so what we do from there is we kind of just articulate with them, or really understand, like, what do you have on your site, and what is what we call a core user path. Like, we aren't going to try to solve a blog from 10 years ago. That's not what WCAG is asking for. Probably not what the plaintiff firm is reaching out for. They're looking for someone with a disability to be able to consume in an equitable manner. But let's take the simplest path to that core user flow and understanding what is in that core user path, what are the key templates that you're building on, versus trying to make accessibility a bug chasing exercise. And I think that's a lot of times historically where accessibility is very confusing. The easy button is, let's just hit a scan that might be free, and we run it across 1,000 pages and we see 100,000 issues. Well, the reality is a lot of those 100,000 issues probably fall into the same or exactly identical elements or components of the site, that you fix it at the component level and it kind of rolls across maybe 100, 500, 1,000 pages. So we don't have to solve this 1,000 times.
Counter to that is some that are doing these online free tests. What that online free test doesn't show you is context. And that's what a lot of people are getting burned on, because you have two things, right? You have technical, which the buttons on the page, all the things that an evaluation like that online will tell you. But then you have the context, which is what is in this room? How did you get to this room? And that's a part that's often overlooked. And again, it goes back to education and just unawareness. It's not because you did it on, you vindictively did this. But I've had people, hospitality, not of course going to name names, but they have their ADA compliant room, but yet they had a virtual tour where somebody with a disability couldn't look at it. Now that is almost like a double punch in the gut for someone who's innocently trying to book a room who may be blind or low vision. They're not only not getting to this and they know it's there because there's something on the page, but they can't access it. They're not able to complete that booking, so you're losing business.
Yeah, precisely. And I think you explained it perfectly in that this isn't intentional, right? Like, and it's something I actually say a lot. So I love that you sort of set me up perfectly for my favorite line. Like, no one wakes up in the morning and says, I don't want a blind consumer to be able to not book a room on my site. It's not something someone says. It's just not reality. But there is a lack of awareness of, like, when that consumer does come, like, what is their experience? And that's why, I think back to that process that we really lead teams down is, let's take a quick assessment. Like, let's have one of our screen reader auditors, or someone who is blind or low vision and requires what is called native screen reader technology. Let's have them just take a run through the site and kind of assess, is it good, bad, or otherwise? And then that really leads into our testing process of adding that context, as you said. So doing actual manual testing. And I think one of the biggest, we'll call it challenges, because I don't have another word for it, in all of this compliance is accessibility, which can sometimes seem black and white, versus usability. And that's where that doing that human test, having actual individuals with disabilities do that testing, adds that layer of usability and creates that opportunity to understand, like, what is my experience, and what is the context behind that experience, of not just a scan or an automated tool telling you this is broke, but having someone with a disability saying this is broke, but here's why, and here's how you actually drive that fix or drive compliance downstream, that you can then layer across your site or your digital properties.
Real life, another real life example, and I love that we're sharing these. In a recent hotel meeting, I was told that they printed, they did one of the automated tools online, they ran it on their website, and it said, hey, we're good. And they printed out a little form, and their IT guy said, oh yeah, if we ever get a demand letter, we're just supposed to give them this. And I feel bad saying, I've got news for you. This just in. And that IT guy, it's not his fault, nor no one wants the hot potato, which is accessibility. No one wants that hot potato, and it gets left with the IT guy sometimes, or the marketing department. Here's a news flash. That letter, the Department of Justice doesn't care that you didn't know or that you printed out that form. What's going to happen is when they do demand it and they do inspect your site, it's going to be a human, and you bet your bottom dollar they're paying a human that knows what they're doing, and they're going to find every little thing wrong with your site. So the bottom line is just make your site accessible from the outset. Get the little bit of education, go to people like Allyant with Ryan who can teach you, but that's not it. So once Ryan gets a hold of your website and you give all this information, then they've got to fix it.
Yeah, precisely. And that's where, that's what I call the hot potato as well, is like, okay, we had someone do an audit, like an actual valid audit that gives us all of these recommendations. And then sometimes teams are like, well, geez, now what do we do with this? And so how do we drive compliance downstream? Obviously, partners like you that actually focus on accessibility and lead with accessibility are a big differentiator.
And we don't do, thank you, but we only do virtual tours. So
correct.
We do have another company that we work with, and I know that you've worked with also, that we send people to because they have someone who is a specialist in accessibility. If you go to your developer and they say, yeah, I think I can do it, or they don't know like what an ARIA tag is or something like that, don't do it, because you're creating more problems for yourself.
Yeah, correct. And that's one of the areas where we do streamline that process, because we have what we call accessibility engineers, not just auditors that do essentially usability testing and give you like a big written feedback on, hey, what's wrong? Here's how I'd improve it. Doesn't really help teams impact change. So one of the biggest differentiators in our testing process is really documenting not just what is wrong, but more specifically, how do you fix it? So for all of the issues that our team finds, because they are full stack web engineers, they have a background in development, including our blind accessibility engineers, the audit is step one. The bigger step in how you impact and drive change, and how we drive that for our clients, is handing off something that's actually tangible, that has a human element to it, that says, here is the issue, here is why your carousel isn't accessible, here's why your contact form isn't accessible, and here's how you fix it. The reality is, to your exact point, most development firms still today, I think a lot of them say they do accessibility. They don't really know what they're saying when they say they do accessibility, unfortunately. So it is really important to, whether it's through you or us or anybody, just having a background in actually a recommendation that is, hey, we've done this together before. We do trust this team. They do know how to implement these changes.
And that's
because
key.
Otherwise, like you said, you can have an audit done. If you hand it off to the wrong people that don't really know what to actually do with that audit, you're going backwards. And then when a demand letter comes in 12 months, then you're really going to be in panic mode, because it's like, didn't we solve this? Only to find out the solve wasn't good.
And your system is fantastic, and I've heard that from this other developer that we work with. You guys have a very unique way of laying out the problems, the solutions, everything in a really nice back-end setup that you have. So kudos to that. I want to touch on two more things quickly. If you're looking for things like what we offer with virtual tour accessibility and you're going to other vendors, you need to ask for a VPAT. If they don't have that VPAT with that credibility for accessibility, you're just believing that they're telling you, oh, it's accessible, because they'll take your money. But please be sure, we do have VPATs. We have multiple for different systems that we use, and that's something that governments or universities will ask for. Talk about the importance of that with software like virtual tours.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad you brought that up, Steve, because I think it's one of the biggest, I'll call it a trap, for lack of a better term, that I see clients face. And it's not anything intentional, it's not anything we did, but it's something they find out, unfortunately, the hard way. So, we'll do that initial assessment of, to your point, who do you use for virtual tours? Who do you use for your booking application? Who did you
Right.
use for your social media, Instagram feed? And I think a lot of times, unfortunately, especially today, I do think when I think about our customers and even our shared customers, they are thinking about accessibility. They're asking the right questions, but I think there's a little too much comfort at taking vendors at face value. Like, yeah, of course we do accessibility. Yeah, of course we're compliant, only to get that demand letter downstream, and then the end consumer, the end client that's implementing those third parties is who has to deal with it. And I think that's where clients that I deal with get frustrated. It's like, well,
Yeah.
why did so and so tell me they were accessible? It's like, well, to your point, you took them at face value. Ask for that VPAT. Ask for that proof that, hey, if I'll call it really baseline. If they don't even know what a VPAT is, they probably don't actually know about accessibility, right? So, even just asking the simple questions can sometimes lead you down the path of, okay, do you do this or do you not, or like, how much have you thought about this? So yeah, I think it's a great point. Working with a vendor like you who has done it.
Well, and you can't fake it. A VPAT is thousands and thousands of dollars, and that's a good thing, because people who are, maybe misrepresenting their product and don't have a VPAT, they've not only not invested in themselves, but they don't have protection set there for you. If you're interested in speaking with Ryan, you can contact me. I'll forward you right over to him. He'll get to the top of his inbox, and he can help you with, in depth on more of these, questions and scenarios that come up. But real quick, I don't know if you know this. The way I got introduced to Ryan's company was I was on a shoot in St. Lucia and met one of your founders at a cruise, Mark Lasik, at a time when this was like 6 years ago, when I was just beginning to get submerged in the accessibility world, and I felt clueless. And I had nowhere to turn. I sit down at dinner, or I'm at the pool in St. Lucia, and I'm talking to this guy about, what do you do? What do you do? And he tells me accessibility. I'm like, you're kidding me. And so I got a real quick tropical education on it, and then got connected to Ryan and the team. And I can't speak, high enough about the work you guys do. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate that, Steve, and likewise, we appreciate vendors like you who do put accessibility at the forefront. And I know that sounds cliche, but it's uncommon. And again, it's unfortunately hurting the end client of services like yours, like your competitors, that aren't
Right.
thinking about it, or saying at face value, yeah, we do accessibility, without really knowing what they're doing or what they're selling. They're using it as a sales tactic without understanding that, look, the end client's who's going to have to deal with this. So,
Yep.
likewise,
That's the key.
Yeah, that
Totally
is
the key. The hot potato, right?
Yeah.
They tell you they did it, and then you're stuck with it, because if it's your
stuck
domain,
with
that's
it.
who they're coming after.
Yep, precisely. So
That's
again,
great stuff.
Likewise, kudos back to you, and your clients are in great hands.
Ryan, thank you very much. Again, if you'd like to get in touch with Ryan at Allyant, as you can see, great guy. I'll put you right in touch with him. Just send me an email to barnes@barnescreativestudios.com. I'll put that info on the screen. Ryan, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Steve.